Hello, and welcome back to Let's Get Lit. In today's episode, we're going to be going over the lawyer's tale from the Canterbury Tales. This tale is all about virtue, a beautiful heroine who stays true to who she is, and all sorts of adversities that she faces throughout her life. So, let's hear this noble tale from the lawyer, shall we? This part of the story starts out with the host, who sees what time of day it quickly is turning to and addresses the group. In essence, he tells everyone to please stop wasting time. According to philosophers, that's the worst thing in the world to waste. So, he looks to the group and he asks the lawyer if he happens to have a tale for everyone. The lawyer goes on to state that he doesn't really have a story that could compare to the Knight's Tale in its elegance. He says that pretty much every great tale that he could think of has been told before. He says that he doesn't care for all the ancient storytelling and how horrible events happen in them. He also tells everyone that he cannot tell his tale in rhyme and he will tell it in prose instead. After this, we then go into the prologue of the lawyer's tale. The lawyer's prologue essentially states that how poverty can really change a man and his behaviors. How when someone is poor, they are more likely to beg, steal, or borrow just to stay alive, and how most of their friends would desert them. However, if you're rich, then it seems like you don't really have problems at all. He also tells the crowd that this story is one that he heard from a merchant. The story starts out with the narrator telling us of a company in Syria. This company sells spices, gold cloths, satins, the works. He also goes on to say that they always offer cheap and new wares for everyone. This group decides that they're going to travel to Rome and hopes with starting new trades with the people. While they were in Rome, they met the emperor's daughter, Constance. We learn that Constance is a wonderful woman. She is full of virtue, beauty, and she has great meekness to her that would allow for her to be a great ruler. The people all know Constance as a wonderful person who is virtuous. The lawyer then says that the men, having stayed for a while, were able to sell and trade, but they had to make their way home. Back to Syria they go. While traveling home, the Sultan asks the men all that they have seen and heard from their time in Rome. All of the men can't help but talk about Constance and how much they praised her, how much they thought she was great and wonderful. While the men were talking about Constance, the Sultan gets in his head that he loved her and that he wanted her as his wife. The Sultan says that it is writing in the stars like every other great romance or tragedy, and that it was up for him to decipher what it all means. He tells his men that he must have her as his wife at any cost. And if he couldn't have her, he surely wouldn't know what to do. All of the men talked to the Sultan of the various ways that he could try to get Constance to marry him. Some suggested magic, others a variety of other things. Anyways, one of the merchants tells him that he doesn't think it could be possible due to the different diversities of each region. One being under the rule of Christ, one being ruled under Muhammad, and how due to the word of Muhammad, he can't marry a Christian. The Sultan says that if this is what's going to separate him from Constance, then he will convert himself to Christianity along with his barons. So, he does. He converts everyone and himself to Christianity, and he pays a huge dowry of gold to the emperor for Constance's hand. The emperor sees this and agrees to it, and very soon afterwards, arrangements are made for Constance to be married to the Sultan. The lawyer says that he's not going to go into great detail of all the preparation because it would just take too long. He just wants everyone to know it was lavish and beautiful. When the day fully comes, everyone in town is kneeled down in prayer, praying for the new couple and their safety. The lawyer then jumps to the view of Constance, who's getting ready for the day of her departing. She really doesn't want to go and leave all of her friends and family behind. She asks God to be with her and to help her with her long journey to Syria. She arrives at the boat and she says, "Now Jesus Christ will be with you all," and everyone else wishes her a farewell. The lawyer makes note that it is silly that the Emperor of Rome hasn't found an astrologist to read the stars to make sure their voyage is going to be safe. After this, the lawyer shifts views. We jump to the Sultan's mother, who calls council to talk about her son's doing. She addresses the council and tells them that her son wishes to leave the love of Muhammad behind for a new faith just so he can have a wife. She says she is not going to take up this new religion because she doesn't want to end up in hell when she dies. She asks the council for their help and that she promises that by keeping the old faith, she is looking out for everyone's soul. All of her council agrees to help her and whatever her plan was to be. She tells the council that all of them should be baptized to appease the sultans, but that truly they won't take this new religion in. She also has them agree to that the Christians will feast at her table. The rest of this part of the story is essentially the lawyer just damning the mom of the Sultan. The second part of the story starts when the Sultan and Constance land in Syria, and how everyone is out to see the new couple, including the Sultan's mom. The lawyer goes on to say that she was never as great of pomp and circumstance circumstance of meeting as this one, and how on the outside the Sultan's mother was very kind and sweet and very flattering to Constance, but on the inside was waiting to strike at the right moment. The lawyer compares her to a scorpion. The time comes for that evening for everyone to gather at the feast of the Sultan and Constance. While everyone was seated down and eating, this is when the mother decides to make her attack. All of the council that pledged allegiance to her were at that feast, and all of them killed every single Christian along with the Sultan. The only person who was spared was Constance. This is what the Sultan's mother wanted because she wanted to rule Syria alone. The people send Constance out on a boat with food and water and clothes for her trip back to Italy. The lawyer says she spent many years out on the open water, drifting from Morocco to Greece and back, all the while thinking of death, but death never coming for her. She constantly prayed to God for protection from the elements and that she survived by eating very poor meals. The lawyer then goes on to clarify how this woman could live for 3 years upon the sea and not die. The lawyer's answer is simple: Christ. And the lawyer calls up references to times in the Bible through Christ alone people were saved. Daniel in the lion's den, Moses parting the waters, the people running through, how Mary was fed in Egypt in a cave, and all of these other references. That's how the lawyer basically says Constance is able to be alive. Finally, her boat washes up in Northumberland. When her boat hits the sand, a constable comes up from the castle to look at the wreckage. He finds her and he realizes that she is speaking in a sort of Latin language. He's able to understand her a little bit, but not fully, and she tells them of all the horrors that have happened on the sea and how it messed with her memory. As soon as she hits the sand, she immediately goes into prayer, thanking God that she's made it safe. The lawyer then goes on to say that she begins to work very busily and that everyone who saw her fell in love with her. The lawyer goes on to say that Constance and the wife of the constable, who we learn is Hermegild, become best friends, and before long Constance has converted her to Christianity. The lawyer goes on to say that there are not many Christians in Britain. Most had fled to Wales. However, there were a few around the castle she was staying at. One just happened to be an old blind man. One day, Constance, the constable, and his wife all go down to the sea to have fun and play. While they're there, they see the old blind man, and the blind man asks the wife for his sight. At first, the wife is scared because she thinks that before her Christianity she would have been killed. However, Constance jumps in and begins to preach the scripture of the Bible to the constable, and before long he is also converted to Christianity. The lawyer makes a brief note that the constable was not lord of this place, and that actually Lord Alia was a prince known for a heavy hand. The lawyer goes back to the story and says that Satan was trying to plan a perfect way of betrayal against Constance. The lawyer says that Satan tries to woo her by using a knife, but she is so virtuous she does not give in. So he schemes to bring death to her in a shameful way. The lawyer says that Satan does this one night when the constable is out of town. He uses the night to slip into the room where the constable's wife is sleeping, and he slits her throat with a knife. The knight then puts the knife in Constance's bed. When the constable comes back with the king, he sees all of this, and she has no way to defend herself because the knife is in her bed. Constance goes to trial, and so does the knight. Once on trial, the knight under oath lies and says that he witnessed Constance slitting the throat of the constable's wife. The constable doesn't believe this because of all the goodness and virtuous he has known in Constance throughout their time they've spent together. Then others also come to Constance's aid and tells the king of her virtuous ways. The constable retells the tale of how Constance came to the land. After this, Constance falls down on her knees and prays to God and begs him to free her of this charge. The king, seeing this and having compassion, tells her to go fetch a book at once, and if the knight will swear on it that she slew this woman, then she must face the choices of judgment for trying the case. A book of Gospels was fetched, and upon this book the knight swore that he saw Constance kill the constable's wife. When the knight does this, all of a sudden, he is struck down dead and his eyes burst out of his face. After this instance, she then can convert everyone in that place to Christianity. After this happens, the king decides that he has to have her for his wife. They get married with a great lavish feast and all the celebrations that come with marriage. However, there was one person who was not happy with the fact that the king was marrying Constance, and that was the king's mother, Dungill. The lawyer goes on to say that they consummate the marriage and that soon she has a baby boy. The lawyer states that when the child is born, the king is away in Scotland. The court sends a messenger with letters of the good news to the king, but before he can make it to the king, he goes to the king's mother and asks if she has any messages to give him. While at the mother's residence, she says she doesn't. However, she wishes for the messenger to spend the night and that she'll send him off in the morning with her message. The king's mother gives the messenger a lot of wine and ale to drink, which causes him to fall asleep very quickly. While he's asleep, the queen steals the letters from the messenger and replaces them with fake ones that she's written herself. In these letters, the king's mother states the child was a ghastly and unearthly creature, and how the mother was actually secretly an elf by magic spell. When the king reads the letters, he's filled with great sorrow. He writes back and says that the first child should be saved unto God, and so should the wife, and that when he gets back from Scotland, he should see his wife, and they should try to have another child, and that if God grants him another child, they should be the rightful heirs to the kingdom. The messenger takes these messages and heads back to the king's mother so he could hand her the letters from the king. The king's mother again provides a bunch of food and wine for the messenger, which causes him to fall asleep, and she switches out the letters in his bag for ones that she's written herself. When the messenger delivers the false letter that the king's mother had written, everyone believes that the king wishes for Constance and the newly born child to be taken to sea to drift back to where she came from. The constable is shocked to read these letters from the king. When Constance gets word of what the king wants to be done, she doesn't try to deny it, but instead she asks for God's grace. A boat is made ready for her and her child, and it is prepared with enough food and drink. As she is going to the boat, everyone from the town crowds around her and sees her off. Everyone is saddened by this, and she tells her child that she will not harm him on the voyage. She kneels and asks for God's grace as they travel. She then steps into the boat, and her child are sent off to sea. This is where part 2 of the lawyer's tale ends. Part 3 of the lawyer's tale begins with the king coming home from Scotland, finding that his wife and child are not there. When he asks where they are, the constable's heart grows very heavy and cold and shows him the letters with which his commandments were to be fulfilled. The king gets extremely angry at this, so he goes to the messenger and asks him where he slept every night on his journey while delivering these messages. They come to the realization that the king's mother is the one who wrote these false letters and had his wife and child sent out to sea. The king, in all of his rage, kills his mother and mourns for his wife and child, fearing that they are dead upon the sea. The lawyer then switches back to Constance, who's been out at sea for 5 years with her child, and finally hits a shore. When she lands on the distant shore, she realizes that it is heaven's shore. There is a warden, Stuart, who comes out to her ship and tells her that he's going to be her lover whether she likes it or not. This causes the child and Constance to get upset and begin to cry. Constance praises Mary, and Mary comes down, and the man ends up falling overboard and drowning into the sea. The lawyer shifts focus back to Syria, where word was sent to Rome about the Christians who were slaughtered by the Sultaness. So Rome sent over an army where they burned and pillaged and got revenge for the murder of their people. When they made their way back to Rome, they ran into Constance's boat. The senator in charge, not knowing who she was, brought her aboard and took her home with him, where she stayed a long time with the child. The lawyer then shifts back to Alia the king, who after killing his mother had great remorse and decides that he's going to go to Rome and ask the Pope for forgiveness. He sends out a few servants ahead of time to secure lodging and food and make sure that everything is going to go well. News of this travels very fast around Rome. The senator who Constance and the child are staying with decides to greet the king and make sure that he is welcome in their place. Constance asks the senator if the child may go with him to see the visitor. While everyone is meeting together for a giant feast, the king spots the child and says that he can recognize its face, but not really sure where from. After talking to the senator says that the child belongs to a woman who he found on a boat coming back from Syria. The senator says that this woman would not talk and she would not partake in any sort of sin due to her virtue. The king thinks to himself, "This could be my wife who was sent out to sea." He begs and pleads with the senator to finally meet this woman who he's been talking about. The senator agrees, and soon Constance and the king are reunited. When she sees him for the first time, she faints. And at very first, this upsets him because she thinks he had sent her away to sea. The king is immediately relieved to know that his wife and child had made it out alive. Whenever she came back to, they talked through everything, and they cried and wept and laughed, and their hearts were forever glad when everything was settled and explained. The king then tries to head to the Pope so he can get penance and forgiveness for killing his mother. Along the way, they run into the emperor, which Constance realizes in an instant that that's her father. When she sees him, she immediately goes to him and falls on her knees and tells him everything. How she has a child, all about Syria and what happened to her, from the Christians being slaughtered in Syria, to being sent out to sea, to ending up in Northumberland, to marrying the king, to having this child and coming back to the shore. The king takes all of this in and is happy that his daughter has made it out alive. The lawyer then skips into time, and we learn that the child, whose name is Maurice, becomes a great emperor of Rome, and that Constance goes back with her husband to Northumberland, where they live happily for about a year. A year after they get back, unfortunately he passes away, and she makes her way back to Rome. There, she stays the rest of her life in Rome, never to be separated from her father or her child ever again. And this is where the lawyer's tale ends. I hope you guys thoroughly enjoyed this story. Have a great rest of your day. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, stay lit.